Brilliant. Hi, everyone. So this is our an introduction to OWASP ZAP, and it's going to touch on a bit of security testing. As we've said, the only prerequisites for this, because it's going to be a live workshop, is having a machine, which are on Zoom, so I assume you do, and having Docker installed as well. I'll work through it, and I'll give a little bit of time for installations and so on to go ahead, but we'll sort of work generally at the speed of sort of the midpoint. So I will be asking for input into like where you're at with these things as well, or you can always come back and look at the recording afterwards as well. If you've got any questions, pop them in the chat and I'll do my best to answer them as we go. Just a bit about me. I'm Callum Akehurst-Ryan. I'm a senior tester at Improbable with 15 plus years of experience, mostly focused on exploratory testing. You can see I'm a mind map aficionado, and I'm a kick-ass dungeon master. That's Dungeons and Dragons, nothing sordid. So let's talk about vulnerability scanning and why that might be useful to your organization or to your testing. So what's a vulnerability? Well, starting off, it's a weakness that can be exploited by a threat actor. So what's a threat actor? It's a person or a group that take part in an action intended to cause harm in the cyber realm. That could be cyber criminals, scammers who attack a system for monetary gain. They might infect a system, seek to gain financial compensation for cleaning it up. They might sell stolen data or the exploits. This might be nation states. So think about espionage and intelligence agencies that are aimed to gain information of national interest or sabotage or influence another company or organization. This could be hacktivists and terrorists. So these are idealists. They commit cyber crimes to further their own beliefs. Think like the group Anonymous. They usually don't want financial compensation. They'd rather send a message. And then we've got trolls. Thrill seekers, they just want to learn more about networks. They want to infiltrate a system. Sometimes they just have malicious intent to spread misinformation for fun as well. So that's threat actors who want to cross privilege boundaries. So what that means is accessing things in a network that you weren't intended to be able to access. So that could be data, behavior, or the system itself. So a vulnerability is that we're going to scan for is a weakness in a system that allows people intending harm access to things they shouldn't have. It's worth noting that we can model for things like bad actors and threats in order to understand our security environment via something called threat modeling. And threat modeling is important because it gives us, like I said, that security environment that we would use for penetration testing. We're not going to be looking at that today. We're just looking for that basic initial first pass of scanning for vulnerabilities. So vulnerability scanning forms part of our wider security testing strategy. You can see if we look on a timeline here to say of the software development lifecycle, we start with an idea for something, we create artifacts, so things like Jira tickets and so on, we plan and design, we start developing, build release, and then we get into beyond release. Very early in our software development lifecycle, we might start looking at things like security requirements, so very early in the day. And that's where things like threat analysis can help us and around this design thing, starting to model out to say, what's the security environment of the project or what we're developing? And that's going to inform our later testing. When we get into development, we'll use vulnerability scanning, but we'll use static analysis, SAST, so static application security testing. That's the code base. So we can actually run tools that will look for vulnerabilities on the code base. You can use things like SonarQube and so on, and that will find a number of different vulnerabilities that will exploit. Then we have vulnerability scanning once we've got a product. So once we've built something, and that's called DAST or Dynamic Application Security Testing. So that actually requires a tool to be running, an application to be running, and we actually test it in that situation. So that's OWASP ZAP. That's what we're going to be looking at as well. Once we get into our release and beyond release, we might start looking at penetration testing, which is probably what you're used to hearing as testers. So penetration testing is a targeted series of attacks focusing on exploiting weaknesses in the system to gain unauthorized access and impact that system. So it's white hat hacking. And that's different because it allows, well, it's focused on the environment, the security environment that we're in. So understanding our threats allows us to impact our penetration testing. So what we're going to be looking at around here is DAST, and it's different from your SAST because, well, it's looking at different things. One's looking at code, one's looking at the application under run, and they will find different types of weaknesses. So what's vulnerability scanning? It's effectively what it says on the tin. They're tools, or it's a type of tooling that scans an application to uncover the weaknesses that might exist. They're great because they're good for new starters. They can crawl systems in an automatic way and use pre-canned attacks to drive out weaknesses, which means we don't have to know things, we can learn from them. Worth, though, being aware that it is a dumb tool. SAST and DAST applications will only ever detect the low-hanging fruit or obvious issues. It can't detect logic flaws or multi-stage exploits. And some of the categories of vulnerabilities will be a percentage chance of detection, like SQL injection. So you might see it, you might not. And also, it can be very noisy running these types of tests, these sort of brute force tests, because you'll get a significant amount of false positives. So it's worth coming into this tooling, understanding that it is a dumb tool. It's going to detect a load of things, but they're the low-hanging fruit. And you need to come in with skilled testing and penetration testing to perform meaningful and targeted attacks to get useful information. But these vulnerability scanners are going to give us some vulnerabilities, and it's up to us to interpret them and see what's actually useful in our project space. And as I've touched upon, the different types of tools will give you different types of vulnerabilities. So your static application scanners will review the code. Dynamic application security testing tools will look at the application in use. They'll both uncover different types of vulnerabilities, so both form part of a holistic strategy. We want to be using both of them, but it's not bad if you just want to use one to begin with. Any vulnerabilities we can find are good. It's better to find some than none. So don't worry if you've only got the capacity to start looking at one of them rather than both of them at this time. So very quickly, we'll talk about how these work. So we have here a vulnerability scanner that sits between a front end and a back end. So between your front end and your back end, you've got network traffic going along, and the vulnerability scanner can interact with the front end. They crawl web elements to find links to follow. Because they're web crawlers, we call that tool a spider. So they spider the front end. You start with a seed link, which is a starting point URL, and the spider will start to identify all the links on the page, add them to a list of known URLs to visit, and then visit them recursively to build up a view of the sitemap. It's an automated process to identify the depths of the site, but there are some limitations. So some pages might not be findable because of how the page is created, or because web crawling is disallowed. And the recursive nature of identification and crawling means that it takes some time to complete. It's going to be doing a lot of work. But effectively, vulnerability scanner is going to start by crawling the front end and building up that picture of what the site looks like. Next thing it can do is it can sniff traffic. Any network traffic that's going between your front and your back ends can be sniffed to identify what actions are taking place, which allows the tool to learn about what calls can be made and start to identify the vulnerabilities and exploits. And then network traffic can also be analyzed against known weaknesses to provide a list of potential vulnerabilities. This is called passive scanning. It's great because no attacks are made against the site. There's less risk of actual attack and issues with the environment. And you can also do that alongside web crawling of a site to build up a sitemap and then list your vulnerabilities. Or you can manually do things. So you can manually play with the front end, run whatever behaviors you want, and the traffic sniffer can passively start finding the vulnerabilities in that area that you've played with for a more targeted view of the system. And then the last thing it can do is it can inject payloads. It can make a direct attack. So this is a man-in-the-middle attack. We're actually intercepting the traffic between the front and the back end and trying to inject a different payload into the network traffic. These scanners like OWASP ZAP come loaded with pre-canned attacks so that they can be run against the endpoints and the calls identified during passive scanning. So because this will be an active attack, there might be consequences for your site or your environment, so you should only run an attack against an app that you have permission to do so. Again, a few limitations. It's brute force. It's going to try everything it knows, so it's going to be longer to run, and these tools might become out of date. OWASP ZAP is currently into development, so that means that it's going to be kept up to date, but some tools, you may find that they're out of date. They don't include the most recent vulnerabilities for things, so make sure that you're keeping your tools up to date. Just a reminder, only run vulnerability scanner attacks, so that's the active attack, when you have permission to do so. Do not practice against a live site. Do not run against a demo environment. Do not try it against Google or Amazon or anyone like that, because they will come for you. Make sure to only use local builds, agreed specified environments. So talk to the security managers in your companies to find those environments to use them in, or use locally built sites. Today, we're going to use the OWASP Gsharp. So we're going to install that and run our test against that, because we have permission to do that. So today's scanner, OWASP ZAP, that's the Z-Attack proxy. It's a dynamic application security testing tool, and it contains a number of features that let us scroll, scan, and attack applications in that automated fashion. Why might you want to use it? It's open source, which is great. It's free. It's under development, so it's kept up to date. It's a flagship OWASP tool, so it's in wide usage. It's also really easy to get started with. It's a lot easier than something like Burp Suite, and it is automatable. I'm not going to talk about the automatability of it today, but you can actually fit it into your pipelines as well. So that's the preamble. Before we jump into the practical workshop, did anyone have any questions about any of that I talked through, or is everyone pretty comfortable with what we went through? I'll take silence as, no, Callum, you're doing great. Thanks, everyone. So let's actually get into using OWASP ZAP at this point. So the plan is, oh, sorry, Salish. Yeah, a bit quick. I was trying to get into the meat of the actual talk. So the plan is we're going to install OWASP ZAP. We're then going to talk through the interface, configure it for scanning and attacking, get the spider crawling things, do a passive scan whilst using a local application, and then run an active attack and look at the results as well. So here's what we're going to try and do. So the first thing we want to do, everyone, we're going to install OWASP ZAP locally. So what I want you to do is, if you navigate to this link that I will, it will be like that. And let me, I will share this. I would share this. Come on. Share this in the chat. And just grab whichever version of the installer is going to work for you. So it will just be, take a sec to download. Once it downloads, you can either double click the installer, or on Mac, move the OWASP ZAP app to the applications folder. So can people give me a bit of a thumbs up when they've managed to do that, or if they've managed to do that? No one has so far. Cool, a couple of people have, brilliant. Cool, it's going well. All right, we'll move on then. So once you've done that, you'll be able to open the application by double clicking it. So what we'll then see is double click it and we'll get something that looks like this. So let's talk through the OWASP interface. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to actually go into ZAP here. So the first thing we're going to see is this persistence pop-up. The persistence pop-up is just options to save details of the session for reuse later. For now, I'm not going to bother because we don't want to reuse this session. So I'm just going to click no, I'm not interested. You can remember your choice. It's a bit old school. It looks quite Windows 95, as you can see, but just click on that and click start. And then we've got our interface. So over here on the left-hand side, we've got our sitemap. That's going to show the structure of the site that the tools have passively scanned or that they've scanned. We've got this start panel. That's used for selecting the start state of the scan, either automated or do that manual sniffing. And it also allows for the input of a seed URL that we talked about to actually scan against. We've also got these output tabs down here. So these are going to be useful to us as they get populated once we've run some things. And the more that we get, as we go into, the more tabs will start to be added, but you can also add them directly from here as well. And important for us, this little cog up here that you should be able to see is the settings. We're going to use these to manage the scan and spider rules. It's really important for setting timings as well. Let me just jump back to these. So we're going to jump in and we're going to start configuring OWASP ZAP. So we want to configure a couple of specifics. So if you've got ZAP open and you've got your cog, I want you to jump into the active scan and we'll talk about that. For people, Stephen and other people who said it's downloading, have you managed to get it open yet? Can people give me a thumbs up if they've got OWASP ZAP open at this point? I'm going to have a bias for action. So if people don't give me a thumbs up, I'm just going to assume it's fine. Oh, no worries. Cool. Thanks, Stephen. Okay. So this is the active scan. So this is one of the things that we're actually going to start sniffing. What we want to do is start changing a few things. So let's look at the number of hosts scanned concurrently. This allows us to run, well, concurrent sessions of our browser. By reducing this, you're going to improve your performance, but it's going to take longer to do. I've kept it at about 2, and I keep my current scanning threads about there as well. What I'm also interested in are these maximum rule and scan durations. This is in minutes. This will basically put a cap on how long the scanning will take. So let's set the maximum scan duration to something like 3 minutes so that they don't take forever effectively, because these have the potential to take hours to run. Next, we'll jump into the next thing, which is the Ajax Spider. So this is this web crawler. The Ajax Spider is specifically good for crawling JavaScript-based applications. We have 2 of them. We've got the generic one and the Ajax one, which is for the JavaScript applications. On this one, we can choose the browser that we want to use. I've selected Chrome, but there are some headless Firefox ones as well. And again, number of browser windows to open. This will be actually running and attacking simultaneously. I've set this to 2. You can have more of them going at once, but again, if you do, you will, have more performance usage of your machine, so it could cause crashes. And your crawl depth. Crawl depth is a scale of 1 to 9 to configure how deep the spider will attempt to go in following links recursively. So lower numbers find less, but will be faster. Higher numbers find more. I've set this to usually to about 7 and found that it's okay. So let's go for about 7 here. And again, our maximum duration there. We don't want that to take hours. I'm just going to take it to 3 minutes for now. But this is basically when we're running our rules, when we're running our attacks, when it will start to try and finish off after. So we'll set that to 3. And then scrolling down a little bit, we should have one for Spider as well. And again, we've got a similar thing here, just a slightly different UI. So maximum depth to crawl. Again, it's 1 to 19 this time for its recursive links. I'm going to set this to about 10, just so that it's in the midpoint. We'll find some information, but it won't be to system performant, to usage, and the maximum duration here, again, we'll set that to 3. Once we've done all that, we just have to click OK. We've got our configuration sorted. And then next, what we want to do, once we've configured our tool, is we want to, I'm just going to share my screen again. There we go. We want to install the OWASP dupe shop. So we've got our tool, our vulnerability scanner. Now we want to have an OWASP dupe shop. We want to have an application that we can, oh, the application scans, the active scan setting. Yeah, no worries. So active scan looks like that, Stephen. So set your rule duration to about 4, scan duration to about 3. Very quickly on that one. Next one is set the Ajax spider, set to about 4 and 7. And then your spider, set those values as well, set the maximum size to about 3. All right, so everybody, I'm going to put these commands in the chat as well. So if you could open up your CLI terminal and run these commands. So we're going to pull the Gsharp and then start running them. And then we should be able to browse to localhost to actually run it. So I've got it pulled. So I'm going to open my terminal, run that. So the reason why, the Ajax spider versus the spider, Salish. So the Ajax spider is specifically used for JavaScript and it's optimized for JavaScript front ends, whereas the spider will be just generic. So the Ajax spider will be optimized and will find more information, find more vulnerabilities and scan better, whereas the spider itself is just generic, effectively. So you can use the spider for anything, but if you know you're using JavaScript, pop over to the Ajax spider, you'll find more things. Cool. This is my Gsharp. It's just running at the moment. Once it's running, we can run to localhost 3000. Let's see if that's running. Not yet. There we go. There we go. So this is the Gsharp. It is an OWASP tool that's been built specifically to include a number of vulnerabilities, and it's great for scanning against. So we're going to install that, and we're going to, well, now that we've installed it, we can actually start attacking it and seeing things used against it. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to use the spider against the OWASP Gsharp. So what I want you to do is go to automated scan, and we're going to go and paste into our URL to attack localhost 3000, which is the Gsharp website. We're going to use Chrome and this traditional spider. So if you untick this, it will be the Ajax spider, which is good for JavaScript front ends for now. Let's just use the traditional one. I'm going to set that to Chrome and attack. What you can see is straight away, the spider starts trying to do things against the Gsharp. It's going to make all of these different requests and gets. And it's going to also start populating my sitemap. So you can start to see all these different requests that it's finding out while it's scanning. So it's still running now. And because we set a 3-minute limit for the spider in our preferences, it's not going to be an exhaustive scan by any means, but what it's going to be doing is just giving me some information. I've got a little button here next to the progress bar that shows me the types of things that it's searching for and attacking at this point. So you can see it's running a number of different attacks. And what we can see now is here in, so we can see, if you go to the spider thing here, you can see, right, we've got all of the requests that it's tried to do. And then on the sitemap, we've got all of the different pages and attacks that it's found on the sitemap. Whether there's a little spider that shows that it was found via the spider, whether there's a flag next to it, it shows that there's an alert. We've found a lot of alerts already because it's actually been passively crawling them, but we'll go into those a bit later. So that's the spidering. So that's the first thing that we do, map out our web page. Was everyone able to try that and give that a go? Yeah, got some thumbs up. Brilliant. So the next thing we can try and do are things like passive scanning. So if I go back and I do a manual explore, so click back there, click the manual explore button, start with a seed URL, just like last time, and we can launch a browser from here and actually start playing with it manually. Now, this HUD, this heads-up display that exists, if you check that, it will open the browser with an OWASP ZAP heads-up display. Now, you can it will open a browser with the heads-up display. I found that it doesn't work very well because I have two screens. I'm more than happy to have this open as well as the browser as well. So it's up to you. You can do some things with it. I'm not going to show it because I found it doesn't really work. Now, any and all traffic when we start running these things. So let's enable the HUD. Sorry, let's launch the browser. Come on, let's do it with Chrome. It's going to actually run me a little Chrome session. There we go. You might find that this doesn't work with your machine. If you do, you'll need to set up a proxy. Something like Foxy Proxy will work. If not, it should just start being able to run through what we're doing here. It should be okay. So if we start playing with the tool, we should start to get some more traffic coming through in our output, in our history, sorry. Is it starting today? No, it doesn't like me today. Bear with me. It's a bit temperamental. Sometimes I haven't got my proxy running, that'll be why. There we go. Right, so this should now start. Typical. I only just installed this today, so to run on this machine, and I obviously haven't configured it properly. Sorry about that. So normally, when you click this launch browser, it should launch a browser window for you. On Macs, it's a little bit temperamental. You have to have your proxies running properly. Mine is not working today, but you should be able to then manually play around with the front end and start to see more in the history and also in the sort of like outputs as well of things. And it should build up your sitemap for you as well. Sorry about that. So now that we've got a sitemap set up, the next thing we want to do is actually run an attack. What we want to be able to do is understand how to remove items, first of all, that we don't want to scan and attack from the sitemap. The way that we do that is we can either click on something, right-click it, and say include in context. So if I put that into the default context and add that, okay, you can see now it's got a little symbol next to it. Whenever I add a page to being in context, the attack will run against it. So we can set our attacks to actually run against what's in context. So I want to set all of this website to be included in context. So let's set that to be the default in context. There we go. So this whole page is now in context. I can click this little icon at the top here to see only what's in context for me, or turn it off and see everything. So if I was to say, delete that or exclude from context. So this last page, take that out of context. And when I press that button, that last one won't be shown anymore. So vendor, and the vendor's gone. This is really important because your passive scanning may end up finding sites that you don't want to scan for, don't want to attack. So you want to be able to configure your system to say, right, yes, only attack these things or don't attack these things. So next, we want to make an attack. So we're going to attack the root website, which is the folder of the localhost 3000. And the scan's going to go through recursively and attack all the pages that we found in our spidering and any manual exploration that we've been able to do. So if we right click this and click attack, and then we're going to do this active scan. So the first thing you want to do is check this show advanced options. We're going to want to actually start having a look at our advanced options here. And by having a look through these options, here are the ones that I found are useful. So if we go to policy, we can start looking here at how deep and how powerful we want our attacks to be. First thing we want to configure is our alert threshold. So our alert threshold can either be low, medium, or high. Setting it to high will reduce false positives and show less issues for low-hanging fruits, which might be needing a technical demonstrator or an early product. Setting it to low for a low threshold, it's going to throw up a lot of false positives, but you'll definitely find everything. I'm just going to set mine to high for now. And then my attack strength. The attack strength is just the number of attacks being made for each endpoint. So setting it to low will reduce the number of attacks, finding less deep issues, which is, again, fine if you're early days on something, and it will take less time to run as well. You can go all the way up to insane, and that's really hammering your system. It will take a while to load. It will take a while to run, but it will really find things and really put things through its paces. I'm going to set mine to low. See, that's a general one, but it hasn't actually gone through each of the attacks and set them. So you've got you can set default thresholds to all. So we click go and go, or we can set, I want a high threshold and a low that to all, go and go. So that's really useful. I've also noticed something that's quite interesting to see is if we go to information gathering and go to directory browsing will really try to hammer and go through and find every single file and map out everything on the whole site to exploit vulnerabilities. It takes a long time to run on this site. So I'm just going to advise for now, setting that to off. So if you click there under threshold, you can set that to off. What this means is you can set any of these to off. You can basically ignore things if you don't want to run them. So, and like I said here, you can set each of your each attack, so we've got cross-site scripting, you might want to set that threshold. You can tailor things effectively. Once we've set and configured to our heart's content with our policies, what we can do is we can click scan. And again, this should run in accordance to the time limit that we've put on things. We've got a pause button and a stop button next to the progress bar. And we've also got the ability to look here with this scanning tool and see what's being run. If we're finding that something's taking a long time to run and we're bored of it, we can click this skip button and just progress it past what it's running at the moment. But what this is doing at the moment is using all of these pre-canned attacks and running them against the system for us here. It's doing that. Brilliant. Now that's finished. Click close. And we can see, again, in our active scan, a lot of attacks that have been made against the system and lots of flags that have happened here. So these are all the alerts that we've got. So all the attacks being run comes in our output panel as well. Or not for me at the moment, sorry about that, under the active scan. And once we can double click, can we double click? No, we can't double click these. So now that we've run our actual attacks, we've seen it running. we've spidered something, we want to see the alerts, we want to see the vulnerabilities that have come out of the tool. The next thing we want to be able to do is actually start looking at alerts. So there's the tab over there. And you can see that these are all pulled together by importance. So we've got different colored flags here. Blue ones just for information, yellow ones less important, and then we've got our red ones as well, which are important. You can expand the header of each instance to see the specifics under them. And you can see it's giving me a lot of information here to see what's going on. This is a cross-domain misconfiguration. So what this means is that the header here has been just set to have a star there rather than being actually useful. We can expand to see the vulnerable endpoint if I double click. There we go. By double clicking, we can see lots of information. So we can see evidence, we can see the actual URL that was attacked, we can see descriptions and information. These are really useful because it allows us as new starters to get going on using the system. And it allows us to start learning about these types of attacks and these types of problems and vulnerabilities. We've also got the benefits of having this evidence, which is something that's actually highlighted up here in the header text and the header body, which allows us to actually start to see where was this problem in the traffic that was sent, where is this vulnerability, and we can share that information with our teams. The actual piece of like vulnerable code is actually highlighted there as well in all of these. And again, double clicking it, you can see the specific URL, what the problem is. That's the evidence, which is that header, and then what the problem is with it as well. Just having a look at, yeah. I've just got a few little tips here. So when you're looking at these requests, if you right click in the header and change your syntax to be plain and your view to basically untick word wrap, and again, the same here in the body text, change your syntax to plain, your view to untick word wrap, make sure that these are set to text as well. It will just improve the performance of the tool, because if you try and word wrap everything, especially when you've got big payloads, it will cause the system to crash. And also, we can make sure that we're looking at things based on the scope of what we're doing. So remember, we set everything here to be in scope. Again, if you click your little thing down here, your target, it will just, you can see it's removed a load of useless things there that aren't related to our scope. So that was effectively a very whistle-stop tour. A very whistle-stop tour of the tool. Hopefully you were able to follow along somewhat with it. It's worth just reiterating that tools will just spit out everything that they find. Once we've started to look at these things, once we've started looking at the alerts, we need to start applying analysis using context and pragmatism to provide meaning to what we're seeing. So we saw all of those alerts. You don't want to just bombard your team with all of those alerts. Start having a look. Do these things matter? Is it an internal URL? Is it something that's actually going to be problematic? Is it really important? And just start giving information on, say, like, change this header. And also start using the tool because it gives you some descriptions of in each of the alerts. How do you get an export of the alerts? That's a really good point. Let me show you that. So you should be able to save as raw the response and body. And I haven't got the specifics about, because I haven't actually been exporting. I've been using the tool directly at this time rather than exporting these sorts of things. But leave it with me, Devon, and I will have a look for a specific way to export the report of these things, because I know you can. It's just dropped from my mind at the moment. But when we do look at things, make sure to start looking at the description and the solution of everything so that we can start understanding the results. What I found is each of these types, like cross-domain JavaScript source file inclusion, really easily Googleable. And OWASP has big websites where they've got lots of information about these types of things. So you can start to say, right, this is a Java source file inclusion. What's it done there? In the payload, it has tried to, in the body, sorry, it has of the response. We're seeing that in the request. It hasn't sent anything. So we can start understanding that this JavaScript file is being included as well. Salish, yes. This basically is a tool that allows us to do web applications. So anything where you've got a front end and you can sniff traffic to a back end, effectively, it will allow you to do that. So it does require those sorts of API SOAP calls. So just going back to this. So yeah, when we want to share our results, do remember, be pragmatic, ask what do we need to actually start sharing at this stage of the project. If it's a technical demonstrator, use low-hanging fruit. If it's a production system, start looking at more important things. Do provide context and meaning. Do that Googling, use the tool to start finding out what's actually wrong, how will it affect our customers, use that threat modeling to provide the latter there, and be specific. Give details of the attack used, look at the header, look at the body, start to see what's going on with that and how this impacts endpoint requests and responses, and also be secure. Make sure that when you are exporting, when you are looking for information and you're sharing it, share with the people who need it and also share it in a secure location. If you start putting all of these vulnerabilities into something open source or Slack or something, that makes them visible all over the place. So that was the sort of whistle-stop tour of things. I've seen a few questions that I've sort of answered there, and apologies that my manual scanning wasn't working very well, but hopefully that's given you a brief taster on how to get going with this tool and hopefully demystify a bit of penetration testing and security vulnerability testing, because it's an area that we should be able to just kick up, start having a look at and start sharing information about, because everyone wants more secure systems, right? I will just give a few minutes to say, has anyone got any questions at this time? Testing mobile apps. I haven't seen this used for testing mobile apps. Again, I think this is primarily for like web-based applications using the stack that it has rather than mobile applications. And thanks, Stephen. Yeah, definitely try and use it. Introduce it as an in-sprint activity. It's really easy to just kick off, start seeing some vulnerabilities and talk to your teams about it as well. Can you headlessly run it? Yes. The answer to that, Vitor, is yes, you can inject it into your CI/CD pipeline. There are ways of doing that. I'm not going to share the details of that now. There's a lot of support out there because this is an open source tooling. So yes, you can actually fit it into your pipelines. If there's interest in that at some point, hopefully I'll do some looking around and I'll be able to run something like that. But yeah, what will happen is it will sit within your pipeline and it can then spit out the vulnerabilities as you go. So yeah, that's definitely doable. Brilliant. Yeah, please do. I say, if you find good ways of getting it running within with different toolings, let us know, because you know, we love to see that. Anyone else got any questions? Brilliant. Oh, yes, Vikash.
Sorry, I know I was going to jump in and say, looks like that's everyone. So I was just going to say thank you very much for that, Callum. Very insightful, and looks like everybody got a lot out of that. I was just before sort of wrapping everything up, I was just going to post in the chat the link to the LinkedIn group, which is where this will be shared afterwards. Yeah, feel free to connect or follow with myself and I guess Callum as well on the socials for any follow-up questions, or you know, Callum's always sharing great content. So keep an eye on what he's doing. But if that's it from everybody, thank you very much for joining us. I'll get everything wrapped up and out over the next couple of days, and shared with you all soon. Thanks, everyone.
Cheers, everyone. Bye-bye.